Hey guys, welcome back to the Warwick F1 podcast. This is episode 5 of the 2025 season, and we are today reviewing the event of the Chinese Grand Prix. We had a sprint weekend this week, so we had 2 races, 2 qualifyings, which means we've got quite a bit to unpack. Now, I am a new voice. I am Anwar, your new content creation officer, and I'm hosting this episode. I am not hosting and doing this episode alone, though. We have 3 guests to help me delve into what we have just seen over the course of the last weekend. We've got Callum, our president for the season. We've got Katch, our ex-president for the season, and Daniel, who is a returning guest. Now, I want to firstly hand it over to Callum to give us a rundown of the order for the Sunday. Take it away when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Anwar. We'll quickly run through the orders of the sprint and the points winners for that. So Hamilton picking up his first win in a Ferrari, taking all the 8 points from first place in the sprint. Then Piastri in second, Verstappen third, Russell in fourth, Leclerc in fifth, Tsunoda in sixth, Antonelli down in seventh, and then Norris gaining the last point in eighth. And then going over to the main race on the Sunday, we have a McLaren 1-2, a very nice result, exactly what McLaren are wanting after, and exactly what Piastri is wanting as well after a disappointing home race last time round. He got first place, followed by Norris in second. Russell taking the last place on the podium. Verstappen close behind in fourth. And then Ocon with an amazing result for his new team, Haas, in fifth. Antonelli in sixth. Albon in seventh. A great result for Williams. Behrman in eighth, getting a double points finish for Haas. Stroll in ninth, and then Sainz in 10th. Those results both coming after the double DNF disqualification for Ferrari after it found that both their cars were illegal and could not qualify for the end results. Hadjar narrowly missing out on the points in 11th. Lawson with another disappointing race finishing in 12th. Jack Doohan in 13th. Bortoleto in 14th. Hulkenberg in 15th. And Tsunoda finishing off the finishers in 16th. Alonso, unfortunately, DNF due to an engine retirement or a retirement issue. Leclerc, Hamilton, and Gasly were all disqualified. Gasly and Leclerc, the cars being underweight, and Hamilton having, I think, an incorrect floor or on something along those lines. So, yes, that was the running order on Sunday.
Thank you, Callum. I want to start off this episode by essentially giving me their immediate thoughts after the race. And I guess as a weekend as a whole, what did we think of what we saw over the course of the last 3 days? I want to start with Daniel. What was your thoughts behind it, all the events?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think the sprint format for China, it works, but there are some issues. I think, for example, shortening the DRS zone on the back straight was a mistake. It wasn't quite powerful enough. But on the flip side, that led to some very creative overtakes. I enjoyed, for example, Verstappen on Leclerc. That was a great overtake, as well as the Norris and Russell back and forth that they had for a little bit as well. So there were some good moves. It was I'd say a slow burner overall, but I enjoyed it. Yeah.
I generally agree with what you said. How about you, Katch? What was your takeaways from it?
It was all right. For waking up at 7 a.m., I think we were spoiled last weekend. Australia was so good, and we were hoping for... Well, I wasn't hoping for an exciting one because it's China and I don't really expect much from it, and that's kind of, in my opinion, what we got. Sure, there were quite a few overtakes, and I guess for me the most exciting part was the post-race with the disqualifications. That I preferred and found more exciting than the actual race itself, despite the McLaren, 1 and 2. But yeah, it was all right in the end. It was just your average Grand Prix that is a bit mid.
We really got brought down to earth, haven't we?
Yeah, I just wasn't a fan. I guess if there was more competition to the McLarens, it would have been more exciting. As much as I am a McLaren fan and I love the fact we got a 1-2, I just think if there was a bit more competition, maybe from Verstappen or the Ferraris, it would have been a better race.
I'm certainly going to have to agree with Katch on this one. I thought it was just very much procession. I think it was more of a race where I was a big fan of the end results rather than the race itself. I'm very happy for Hamilton being able to get his first win in a Ferrari and be able to get a good result in the new team, obviously, and also happy to get a 1-2 led by Piastri. I did feel quite sorry with Piastri at his home race last time around and not being able to follow up on the 1-2 with Norris. So I'm glad that he was able to properly control the race this time around, as we'll go on to discuss. And also some really good results for Haas and Williams, both double points finishes, as we mentioned after this qualification. But apart from that, it really did just feel like a procession, to be honest. And I think the fact that Kimi Antonelli got driver of the day, and I think he was, if you listen to his post-race interview, he was definitely as surprised as we all were. And I think that just shows that there wasn't really any standout moments, or for me at least, there wasn't really any standout moments. It was just felt like a procession to the end, unfortunately. And as Katch mentioned, maybe not very good to be waking up at 7 a.m. for.
Yeah, it felt like I am inclined to agree. It wasn't the most entertaining race, but I actually think this was pretty important in terms of some narratives. And I think I want to start with the McLarens here, because we came out the last weekend thinking that they looked pretty dominant. I know we had a bit of a back and forth in terms of, is this going to be the story for the season? I guess the first question I want to pose to all of you here is, how has that affected our perception on what this championship is going to look like? How has this 1-2 from the McLaren, as well as the performance in the sprint race, how has that affected what we expect going forward?
Yeah, I think this definitely feels like a very different win compared to last time around. Last time it was obviously in very wet and changing conditions, so it was a bit more down to luck and also down to the individual skill and talent of the drivers behind the wheel. We've said before that the rain is the great equalizer, whereas this time around it really felt, because it was the first race we had with relatively normal conditions, and it was a lot more down to the pace of the car and the fact that McLaren were able to completely dominate during the entire weekend, apart from, you could maybe argue, the first sprint qualifying and the sprint with Norris finishing down in 8th. But the race just felt like no one was going to be able to match them at all. Obviously, the Ferraris weren't really anywhere, despite even before they got the disqualification. Verstappen was charging through the field and had a bit of pace come the end, but he did have a few problems, I think, with tyre wear near the start. And even though Russell did get third, I don't really think he showed any signs of challenging for the win. It was really a dominant victory, as the 1-2 result shows for McLaren, and I think they'll be very comfortable from here on out. And it gives them a lot of confidence for the season going forward. Obviously, the season's not completely over yet. A lot can still change, but they've got a lot of confidence and are very happy in the position that they are now.
Yeah, you were right about the McLaren race pace, Callum. That was pretty ominous out front, and they weren't looking very challenged. It seems as if Oscar Piastri has made a statement drive. He's here to drive for the championship. He wants to contend for that. He's made that very clear that he doesn't want to be in that number 2 role to Norris anymore, and he's going to push him as hard as possible in the future. We've seen in some races that Norris tends to slip behind Piastri in terms of overall raw pace at some tracks more than others. And there's a little theory on this. Jolyon Palmer first pointed it out after qualifying, but I did a bit of research and it kind of holds up. So it seems like Norris seems to struggle more at the front limited circuits as opposed to rear limited. So that means the circuits where the front axle has more degradation, there's more lateral energy through the front tires. And those other circuits like China, like Spa, like Hungary, and those were the 2 last year where I think Norris had the largest pace deficit to Oscar Piastri, as well as Suzuka. We saw in 2023, that was where Piastri got his first podium, and he was just faster than Norris the whole weekend. That's where we're heading next. I expect Piastri to be strong there. But he seems to favour more the rear limited tracks, more oversteery. There's more slip through the rear tyres, so you can put the power down a bit earlier, like in Abu Dhabi or Canada, where he seems to just be faster. And there are also some cryptic comments the whole weekend from Zach, Andrea, and Lando himself about him having to change his driving style to adapt to the needs of the track and that car specifically. So I just thought that was, I'm sure it's more complex than that, but I just thought that was something interesting that I had kind of picked up over the weekend, and maybe we can run with that. Maybe there'll be some more predictive validity over the year of that.
I think certainly with the in comparison to last year, Piastri definitely at times showed what he was capable of on his day, such as Baku is probably the standout performance for me. But there was times where he was inconsistent, and that's why Norris was the lead driver this time round. But I'm kind of hoping that Piastri can stay like how he is at the moment and really start to have a lot of consistency in those tracks, as Daniel was alluding to, that maybe he isn't as good compared to Norris, as that will bring us a very good battle in McLaren for who gets to be that lead driver for the Drivers' Championship, because I think this season it's definitely not going to be as clear cut as Norris is going to be the first driver and Piastri is going to be the second driver. So it's going to be really exciting, and I think Piastri has given himself a great confidence boost for not only beating his teammate this time round compared to last time in Australia, but doing so in the dominant manner that he did, being able to convert the pole into a win is just phenomenal.
I think this is one of those where it could mean a lot, this particular victory, as we go later through the season. I want to try and shift this conversation towards Norris here. I'm going to pose this question to Katch. Did we see some of the weaknesses Norris has in terms of mistakes over the course of this weekend? Particularly looking in regards to his performance on the Friday qualifying and the Saturday sprint race.
Yeah, the qualifying for the sprint was a pretty poor showing. I think there were some issues, but you can't really deny that Piastri completely, as we've said, as Callum and Daniel and you have said, that Piastri was the stronger driver this weekend overall. It did show in the race that Norris was able to kind of play the team game. He wasn't willing, and he knew he probably didn't have the ability or the pace to push for that win. So he wasn't gonna, for example, like we saw in Hungary, he knew that he was the better driver. He had more pace in the race, so he was willing to push and wanted that win from Piastri in the end. But we saw a different thing here where he accepted, okay, my teammate is stronger, but I'm still good as a number two for this race, so I am going to get the best result that I personally can. And that's what we saw. The qualifying was a bit of a shame, but I think maybe that could be... I haven't heard those topics and discussions that Daniel mentioned about the front axle stuff, so that's really interesting to me. I learned that now. But maybe that is a bit of a trend we saw, especially in the recent years. We'll see when we go to tracks like Spa that he is very strong at anyway, despite the different circuit type. We'll see whether he's learnt from over the winter break and over the last year. But just regarding the race, we have to mention that brake pedal issue. My gosh, I was on edge. I was going to have a breakdown if he got caught. That was awful. The fact he was able to control that car, because basically he described it in post-race that, because I think Natalie Pinkham in an interview was like, okay, so what do you mean that you had no brakes, the brakes went long? And he said, well, try drive around a roundabout with no brakes. That's basically what it was like for him for those final 5 laps. And he basically had no ability to brake. He lost about 7 seconds to George in 2 laps, which was, it was impressive car control, that was, to be able to just keep it on the road, keep it in a straight line, and actually be able to finish that race in second.
I do think if Russell had another lap, it was Norris was a goner. There was impressive management. It's a surprising one in my head because we hear it in the radio on the radio quite often in terms of my brake pedals going a bit long. That's something that we hear quite often, but it's never like really deteriorated to the state that Norris was having to face this weekend. So that was a little bit of a surprise. I just do wonder all of the narrative about Norris learning from his mistakes, and he proceeded to make mistakes in both qualifying sessions actually, because he had to abort his last lap in the qualifying for the race as well. I do hope that doesn't get into his head, because I know that I feel he is that type of person to beat down on himself. Do we also have those concerns about his mentality and how he bounces back here?
I think for in terms of Norris, in terms of looking at the mistakes that he was looking to iron out after last season, I do think we should leave it a little bit longer to see how this progresses over the season, because we shouldn't forget as well, we're coming off of a first race in Australia where, remember, this was not because his win there and his dominance and his incredible racecraft in that race was no way because of the car itself, as we mentioned in the rain, it's the great equalizer. It's where anyone can have the opportunity if they race well, and that's exactly why Verstappen, I thought, was able to get so far up in Australia, because it's more down to raw talent and experience rather than the actual pace you have in the car. And so I thought Norris was absolutely incredible in that race, and he thoroughly deserved the win that time around, and completely dominated the race. It was incredible. And so I don't think we should be too harsh on Norris just yet. Obviously, he will be very disappointed in the qualifying sessions that he had this time around, and that was the reason why he was only able to get as good as 8th on the Saturday sprint. And also I think on the Sunday he did drop down a couple of places after at the start of the race. So yeah, we don't know quite yet, but we've definitely seen that Norris can dominate the race, and I do hope that this is just one time in what is going to be a very long season.
Yeah, I think I think we might need to give it a little bit of time to see what his bounce back is like. But I want to move this conversation a little bit forward here in regards to the Ferraris. Now, like Callum mentioned earlier, the sprint race was won by Lewis Hamilton, and for a brief moment, I thought there was a little bit of hope. Do we think that the performance of the Ferraris this weekend, if we ignore the disqualification, because we'll talk about that a little bit later, did this weekend give us any hope for at least a battle towards the top?
Well, I mean, there's some hope, but that car to me looks very difficult to set up. I mean, we heard whispers after Australia, oh, don't worry, that's not Ferrari's real pace. They just struggled with the setup of the car. And then we come to China and they look like they were on the pace. You know, practice, sprint, qualifying, the sprint itself. They had front-running pace to dominate. And then suddenly they make these drastic changes going into Grand Prix qualifying. I mean, Lewis Hamilton said that it was pretty much terrible after the changes that they made. He said there were good learnings, but, you know, it's just Lewis Hamilton being his usual optimistic self. But I don't know, it's just, we see it so often. There's just there's a setup window for these cars. And if they don't find it, which is especially difficult on a sprint weekend, of course, with only one practice session, then it kind of hinders them for the rest of the weekend. I mean, of course, they had a disqualification anyway, so it didn't really matter. But I don't know, they're going to have to do a lot of learning going forward to put it in that window that can challenge the McLarens, I think.
I think I have seen, I know we're just talking about the sprint, but I do have to, with my point, go back to the disqualification and Lewis Hamilton's ride time, because he was having to dismiss rumours, and Ferrari were having to dismiss rumours the whole lead up to this Chinese Grand Prix, that they had to raise their cars in Melbourne, because if we go back to Australia, in the practice they were actually really strong. Come quali, they were kind of nowhere. And there was a rumour that they had to raise their ride height, that because it was too low down and because there'd be too much wear, and that's why they kind of fell off a bit. And we kind of saw that here. Maybe that rumour is true, that they've had the way they've designed the car and they're trying to run it way too close to the ground, and they're trying to get away with a bit of wear. And because Leclerc got disqualified, they then checked Hamilton's car and they were like, okay, we can't actually let this go now. We have seen your car has too much wear on the plank. We're going to have to disqualify it. So I think there has to be this big internal investigation and make sure that they do set it up so it's not illegal. Hopefully they are going to learn from this, and they have to, because the Ferrari, I think, is naturally a strong car. We saw that in preseason practice. It is a strong car. I still have the faith that it will battle the McLaren for the constructors. But if they're going to have these sorts of issues this early on, this is a shame. This is a real shame for the Tifosi.
I just want to ask you a question quickly, Katch. You mentioned that you still have faith in them to get the constructors. How long until that faith begins to dry up?
Okay, so I don't have faith in them getting the constructors, because McLaren is going to win the constructors. But I have faith that it's going to be a battle. I have faith that they're actually going to be able to fight. I give everything till mid-season, because you have no idea. In the end, at this point last year, we thought this was going to be a Verstappen dominant season. So I'm not willing to judge anything at this point. I think we'll see in the next few races. Europe is where everyone, in my opinion, kind of shows their leg. We're starting off with the Middle East and Asia Pacific section of the season, it's all a bit different to this part is. So I think once they go back to Europe and once we start the European leg, if Ferrari are still making these same mistakes, then I will maybe admit that they've screwed up.
I think in a way, I'm quite surprised that we're all still quite optimistic about Ferrari. I mean, if you look at their past two results, in Australia they were 8th and 10th. All right, yes, that was some very tough conditions, but even before they got disqualified in China, they were 5th and 6th. I mean, I think Russell has looked like more of and Russell and the Mercedes even maybe has looked like more of a title challenger at times compared to the Ferraris, in my opinion. Maybe, okay, discounting a little bit Mercedes because obviously Kimi Antonelli, he's young, he's inexperienced, and so he's not going to mount as much. He's not going to get as much out of that car as say Leclerc and Hamilton going to get if they were in the Mercedes as well. But I thought Mercedes looked stronger and looked like they could manage a race better in the first two races and the first two performances. So I think I wonder if we're just kind of relying too much on what we thought from preseason testing and also from even before that, like in the season review and in the off season, we all kind of expected after Ferrari's huge leaps and bounds at the end of the 2024 season that it was going to be a battle between Ferrari and McLaren. But so far, McLaren have 2 wins. They have a 1-2 finish, and Ferrari, they won the sprint race this time round, but they finished 8th and 10th in Australia, and they were really struggling to get anywhere near the front until they got disqualified. So I think maybe I wonder if we're being a bit too optimistic about Ferrari. Obviously, when it comes to the end of the season, and they will make improvements because it is Ferrari, and we saw that they were able to do that last time round. But like Katch said, I don't think that they should even maybe be considered for the Constructors' Championship at this point.
Well, I'm just looking forward to seeing who comes out on top in the titanic battle between Ferrari and Williams for 4th in the Constructors. Tied on 17 points right now. 1997 all over again.
Oh my days!
Big up Williams.
Okay, they're not going to be that far down. I think this is a blip. They are going to get to like around 5th and 6th, but I don't think. I think 1st and 2nd or Constructors battle, I think, is where I'm doubtful. But I'd like to think if Williams finish ahead of Ferrari, then either something has gone absolutely terrible for Ferrari or something's gone amazingly for Williams. I hope it's the latter. But yeah, I hope that the situation for Ferrari is not as bad as that, at least for Hamilton's sake, going over to Ferrari expecting some things to be better. And now it seems like Mercedes is making a better charge to the front.
And it would make it look like Carlos Sainz's move is the best move ever.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. That has been spilling all the Ferrari secrets to Williams. So now Williams are overtaking Ferrari. Here we go.
Sainz has just been escaping a sinking ship. That's all that's happened.
We love that for him.
It's funny because if we look at all his career moves, it's felt a little bit like that. Because the season after he left McLaren turned out, so a few seasons later, it turned out not to be a great car. So he does have a track record of making some decent career moves. Maybe he's just a visionary. We can't see the vision. I want to pivot this discussion a little bit closer towards Hamilton here, because we saw over the course of the weekend, he seemed like he had Leclerc's number. Were we surprised by this, or was this something that we kind of expected coming into this weekend?
I think that for Hamilton, he may be in, as we mentioned, in the sprint. Can I just say, it's so weird because we're talking about the sprint and the main race like they're two completely different weekends, because it didn't seem like that for Ferrari. I mean, Hamilton was completely dominant in the sprint and was able to, I think, lead every lap, if I'm not mistaken. But then obviously they drops back majorly in the main race before the disqualification. And I think that, yes, Hamilton has shown small signs of pace in the Ferrari car compared to Leclerc, but I think just overall, neither of them are really being able to adapt to the car as much as they would like. So I think I think it's more of a case that they're both not doing great, but Hamilton had one moment of actually showing some decent pace, a small moment of showing some decent pace, rather than Hamilton is starting to get clearer of Leclerc. I think it's more just the fact that neither of them currently is adapting to that car very well.
Yeah, I think you're right about the adapting. I mean, we saw Charles Leclerc losing his front wing end plate, of course, at the start of the race, which was through contact with Hamilton. Neither of their faults, really, but it happened. And he was still faster than Hamilton was, which is kind of you think it probably shouldn't be that way. There are circumstances, maybe. People talk about how the end plate kind of joins all of the planes together on the wing, so it's more of a flexi wing when they lose the end plate because, reduced drag on the straight and more downforce in the corners. But that aside, it should be going slower without an end plate. So where did Hamilton's pace go that he was slower than Leclerc missing an end plate? I have no idea. But on the plus side, I think they work quite well to. There was a kind of team orders situation that was going on. It was kind of misleading on the broadcast, but Hamilton did orchestrate that from the beginning. So there is a recognition from him that he's not quite doing enough. He's not comfortable yet, and he's prioritizing the team. Ferrari overall.
Katch, do you agree with this sentiment of we shouldn't take a lot from Hamilton beating Leclerc this weekend?
I don't want to take too much from it. I think naturally Lewis is going to... It'll give him the confidence the sprint will, but I think, like we've said, it's going to be... They're so on pace with this Ferrari car just not being great. Both of them just want it to be so much better. They want to be getting wins. The fact that McLaren have got both wins at the start of the season and it's different drivers, we would have expected, or at least I was expecting this to be a really strong Ferrari showing and for them to kind of show their hands, but we didn't see it. And I think they'll go back. We've got a week's break. They'll have a look and maybe... I'm kind of agreeing that Lewis is kind of looking at the team at this point that, okay, maybe we can't fight for this drivers, but if we can work out what's going on, Leclerc's been here longer, I'm not going to pretend that I know everything better. So, yeah, I do think that I'm not sure which way it's going to go. It'll be very close between them if the car is all right. If the car's not all right, we've kind of had a history of, remember, was it last season before in Mercedes, where when the car was a bit pile of rubbish, Lewis was kind of letting them prioritize George all over the time. So he's kind of got this history of doing that. I think he might be doing the same here if the car's pretty bad. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to read too much into it.
I think there's just quite a long way of the season to go, so we'll see how that develops. Something that might be developing a little bit quicker is the situation in the second Red Bull. Lawson, again, after having a bit of a horror start to his stint at Red Bull after Australia, doesn't seem like he's made a lot of steps forward this weekend, has he? I'm going to start with you, Daniel. Do we think that the pressure's on here with Lawson?
Yes, but I don't think it should be. I think the
Okay,
responsibility
that's
here...
interesting.
I think the responsibility here is on Red Bull, not Lawson, at this point. I mean, they have a junior team for a reason. That reason is as a proving ground to audition for the main Red Bull seat next to Verstappen. But the issue is, performance in the Racing Bull seat is not correlative right now with performance in the Red Bull at all. And we've seen it time and time again. They bring in new, confident, hopeful drivers, and then they destroy that confidence. They distort that driver's driving style and destroy the stock rating on the driver market as well when they can't cope with how extreme that car is, how pointy, how oversteery, how on the nose it is. And they put them under so much pressure and stress. And then Christian at the weekend, he pretends like that pressure is what's going to spur Lawson on to start performing well again, like as if the embarrassment of qualifying dead last twice in a row isn't enough to make him realize that he's not doing well. That doesn't make any sense. They need to change this culture that they've got. The fixed mindset of an 82-year-old Helmut Marko is not what's needed here, because there's so much incongruence between that car and every driver's driving style except Max Verstappen. And at this point, it's hurting the people in the team as well, because they're taking home less constructors' points. They're going to finish lower in the constructors' standings, which means the employees don't get their bonuses. They don't get the the prestige, and I don't think that's fair because they deserve that, but it's just something not right about it. Lawson said the balance was good for one lap in the Grand Prix, and he tried everything to fix it, but he just couldn't. In Q3, he was carrying too much speed into the corners. He was getting understeer, which is weird despite the car characteristics. So maybe he was trying to overcompensate. I don't know, but it doesn't compute. He was. I don't know what they're doing. In short, sorry for the rant, but it doesn't make any sense.
It's fine. I completely agree, and I do feel very angry about this as well. The fact that we're talking about ditching this kind of amazing young talented driver after 2 races, after judging him on 2 performances, both of which I might add are tracks that he's never raced at, and the first one was in completely horrid conditions where lots of other drivers and rookies failed as well because it was a tough time in the tough conditions in their new teams and their new cars. And I just can't understand the decision, really. I mean, are they really that impatient with their drivers and they're that desperate for results that they're willing to get rid of someone after 2 races? I mean, clearly, he's been put in that seat for a reason. Obviously, yes, he was meant to be more of a long-term prospect, but we've clearly seen what Lawson is capable of. When he came in for Daniel Ricciardo and he put in some really great performances, and I think when he came in last season as well, into his first sort of permanent seat. All right, yes, by the end of the season, I didn't think he was doing too great. He hit a bit of bad form, but he clearly has the caliber and the talent to deliver good race results. And he's been part of the Red Bull Academy for some time now, so he has the experience in racing. And the fact that Red Bull are going to throw that away after 2 race weekends just doesn't make any sense to me. I really hope that this is not the case. I would argue that you wait until... I would still give Lawson, even if he finished last on DNF for every single race, I think I would still give him until at least race 6. Ideally longer. Ideally, you give him until the end of until the summer break. But just the 2 races, that is absolutely ridiculous.
It is a new level of Red Bull craziness, to be honest. I think I would
only Red Bull as well. Only Red Bull would do this.
Literally, only Red Bull.
I would not put it past Alpine though.
Oh, fair. Honestly, I forgot.
Slavio's a bit of a
beast. That's fair enough. Yeah, I'd actually agree with that. But yes.
But I think with Lawson, what's so surreal to me, like we've said, it is 2 races, and we're going to Suzuka next. And he knows this circuit like the back of his hand. He raced here in Super Formula for so long. He knows Suzuka. So, in my mind, if they want to be Red Bull crazy, Red Bull delusion, be it if he does bad, if he qualifies 20th in Suzuka, then you know something's up, because that's just not what it should be. But he's not going to. But like we've said, they're willing to chuck it away, and in this circumstance, they would promote Yuki and even Max in the post race, because the media's trying to cling on to things. In the post race, they said to Max like, "Oh, what do you think about this?" And he's like, "Well," he kind of hinted that it would be really bad for Yuki to go up right now because it's such a hard car to drive. The RB is such an easier car to handle and drive. Give Lawson till the summer break, like, no doubt. There's no way you're fighting for this constructors. Give up on that dream and just please not ruin another driver's career, I beg.
Yeah, I guarantee that if they do actually make the switch around, because I think it will maybe happen eventually if Lawson, because I think Lawson's confidence has been severely knocked because of this. I think it's more of a case of when it happens. I don't think it will maybe happen at the end of 2 races. I have been very wrong before, but I guarantee if this happens, this switchover does happen between Tsunoda and Lawson. Lawson will go into the RB and he'll do amazingly, and Tsunoda will go to Red Bull and he'll do really poorly, because we've seen this pattern time and time again, especially with Gasly coming from Red Bull, and then he was thriving after that, and he's still such a talented and amazing driver, one of the best on the grid. He's the reason that Alpine finished sixth last season, I thought. Same with Albon as well. Look how successful he's been with Williams. again didn't thrive in the Red Bull car, and I really think that we've seen enough examples now to know that it's purely just how they're building the car, Red Bull, and how they're building it around Verstappen and his driving style, which we've heard from drivers like Albon in interviews that he's done. It's a very unique driving style that Verstappen has, a very overly aggressive driving style compared to others. And that is probably the reason that drivers at Red Bull, as well as the immense pressure that they're under compared to other teams, I think, to perform, that is the reason that they are doomed to fail in that second Red Bull seat. It's nothing to do with how good of a driver that they are.
Katch, I have a question. So you said that Suzuka is going to be a key race for Lawson if, contrary to all the rumours, he does manage to get there. What result at Suzuka do you think would save Lawson right now?
I don't think it's a situation he should be saved, but if we're thinking on that,
Well, it's the situation he'd find himself in.
yeah, he doesn't get a chance. I would say he has to qualify top 10. Yeah, he has to. There's no debate on this. If he doesn't qualify the top 10 on a circuit that he is so strong on, there's something wrong.
I'd go top 8 finish, I'd say.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I'm not going to say finish because who knows, we could have a crazy one and it could be outside of his control. But at least qualifying wise, that's where he's been so poor. I think if he qualified better, even if he finished in these poor positions like he has been, if he qualified not dead last, there would not be all this pressure on him. But it's his qualifying that's horrendous. Like, how are we getting Gabriel Bortoleto in a St. Kick Sauber qualifying higher than Liam Lawson in a Red Bull? What is going on?
That is a dreadful statistic.
That's awful.
The fact you're getting beaten by Kick Sauber.
Also, Lawson's qualifying record is currently worse than Nikita Mazepin's qualifying record from the first 2 races.
Oh.
Mazepin's a generational talent.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my days.
You deserve a second chance. That's my opinion.
There's no
There's
we
no
only
way to
reserve
come
the
back from
phrase
that.
generational talent for a few drivers.
I'm serious. He could have been the next Schumacher. I want to see.
Nick Schumacher. Jesus.
Right, I want to finish this discussion.
We like outrageous opinions on this podcast, not incorrect statements.
I want to finish the discussion with just a question to each of you, starting with Callum. Do we think Lawson will be in the seat from Japan?
No. I but then it's helmet marker, isn't it? No. I hope that it's no. I don't think he will. I think he will be in the seat. I do think that at some point before or during the summer break, he will be swapped for Tsunoda. I don't think it's going to be as early as this. I think the pressure is seriously on for him. And I think that even though he may be able to get 1 or 2 decent performances, and I think Japan might be an occasion where he actually gets some decent performances, like I said, top 8 or top 10, like actually scoring some points. I do think the Red Bull impatience and the Red Bull pressure will get the better of him, but I don't think it's gonna. I would hope that it's not. They don't have enough information yet to get rid of him, especially because Australia was such a unique circumstance with how bad the conditions were for a first race, and also the fact that he hasn't raced at either of those tracks before. And probably because they're going to, as we mentioned before, they're probably going to want to see what he's like when it actually comes to a circuit that he knows well, and he doesn't really have as many excuses as the last 2 times.
Daniel, Katch, I want one-word answers, yes or no. Will Lawson be in the seat in Japan?
Yes.
Yes. Questioningly, yes. But I do want to say that in the last day, since the Grand Prix, Christian Horner has come out and said, Yuki Tsunoda did really well in their test comparing Lawson and Tsunoda. So, like, if Tsunoda did really well, then why didn't you put him in that seat originally, you idiot? But, okay.
I was going to say, it's
That
kind
was
of
the question
questioning
we
their integrity of their decisions at this point. The fact that
Sorry,
they're going back on their decision.
You haven't been questioning the integrity of their decisions yet?
Yeah, fair enough. I think
We were all
yes,
questioning it
that's
before.
a good point.
Yeah.
Right. I want to just to quickly touch on the performance of Haas. I'll make this a quick 2-minute discussion. How surprised will we to see the performance comparison from this race to the last race? Because we've got a fifth place, a Haas in fifth, and a Haas in eighth.
I think it kind of, for me, it kind of just came out of nowhere. Like we didn't really focus that much on Haas. I think on the actual TV recordings and what drivers were focused on. I think it was mainly focused on the McLarens out in front and also maybe Verstappen charging through the field. But I think that's absolutely incredible from them and exactly the performance that they needed after what was a really disappointing first race for them. I suppose they always seem to not have much luck in Melbourne. I guess this time it was a bit more excusable because of the tough conditions. But I'm very happy for Haas because I was so pleased to see how much they'd improved last year, and I did want them to continue that progression. I realize I'm saying that for a lot of teams, wanting them to continue that progression, but there's only 10 places.
You just want everyone to do well.
Apart from like Aston Martin and Sauber, yes, but I think
Wow.
I'm
coming to your ass.
Lance Stroll is a generational talent.
Oh my gosh, stop with this generational talent thing.
But Lance Stroll is actually, this is the mad thing though, Lance Stroll has actually been doing decently this time around. He got 9th and I guess Alonso didn't finish this time around, so we don't know where he would have finished, but Australia was also a very good weekend for him as well. I think he scored 6th, which is pretty incredible from him, I think, in what is, I'm pretty sure, the 8th fastest car. And also very tough conditions, as I've mentioned already. But yeah, I'm very happy to see them up there, and I'm looking forward to finding out whether this is the norm or whether the norm is more like what we saw in Melbourne.
Yeah, Komatsu he's done an incredible job in this past year and a half, like how he's changed this team. I guess it's similar to James Vowles in that sense, that both of them have come in and actually brought stability to these teams that were a bit on the rocks, and bringing in 2 drivers is so good. Like I didn't have many doubts that Behrman would do well. Like he's not done amazing so far, but he is still a pretty good rookie. I would say top 2 rookie, but it's great to see. I'm interested to see how it will carry on, like you've said. I could see them in this midfield battle, but at this point we don't even know who's top and bottom because Ferrari are out below a Williams, so who knows whose pace is wherever.
I think it's a funny discussion because we were saying last week how we were really concerned for Haas, and in a matter of 5 days, we're basically seeing a complete U-turn on that. So that's interesting to see. I also thought Behrman had a pretty good race yesterday. Daniel, were you impressed by Behrman's performance?
I'd say I was. Was he No, he wasn't the top rookie. No, that was Antonelli. Yeah, I think it was, like you said, the Haas turnaround has been legendary. I get so happy when Haas do well. I don't know what it is. I just think they're the ultimate underdog of Formula One, really. And so to see them do well, and Behrman in particular, I don't know. He's a really nice guy. I don't know what it is, but he's just one of those drivers that everyone's kind of like, oh, Behrman's done well. That's nice. And he was happy with 1 point, to be honest. He said after the race that he was feeling great with it, and he would have been even more elated to get 4 points next to his name. So great start for him.
We should also mention he's actually quite a good rookie driver. Not just that he's a nice guy. I mean, he is a nice guy, but I think we've all been very impressed with his performances so far, especially when he came in last moment for Ferrari. But yeah, I think I was not so sure about Behrman and how well he would do being jumped up to an F1 seat. And I'm glad he went to Haas before any a bigger team, for example. But yeah, no, definitely good points, a good performance for him to build on for the next few races.
Cool. Let's start winding this one down by talking about our predictions for China and see how accurate we were. So we had 3 sets of predictions from me, Callum, and Lucy. So let's start going through those quickly. We'll start with you, Callum. What were your predictions? Do you have them, or should I list them out for you?
No, it's okay. I unfortunately do have them in front of me now. So yeah, obviously we do. So we've done a different format. For anyone not listening who hasn't listened previously, we do a different format for this year. So my top five. I got 5 points from my top 5. So I predicted a McLaren 1-2. Unfortunately, I got that the wrong way round, but because that's 1 place off for each of the drivers, that's 2 points. Leclerc in third. Won't talk about Ferrari. We've talked about Ferrari enough at this point. Verstappen fourth, which he did actually get fourth, so that's 3 points for the exact correct place. And then Russell in fifth, and he was in third on the last place of the podium, so that's no points there. So 5 points from my top 5, and unfortunately that's where my points stop. Sprint winner was Leclerc. I chose the wrong Ferrari. DNF Isaac Hadjar. We haven't actually mentioned. Haven't actually had time to mention the V carbs this time around, but they narrowly missed out. But Hadjar did actually finish the race this time around, and my random prediction was that all 20 drivers finished the race, and we could have had some interesting discussion if it was just the disqualifications. But Alonso did not finish the race, so just 5 points for me this weekend round. Overall, a pretty poor showing.
It seems like a great showing considering what I came up with. My God. Right, so I predicted. Did you mention who you predicted for your sprint win?
Yeah, so I said Leclerc, so the wrong Ferrari I went with, yeah.
Cool, because I've dropped a stinker here. I said Norris would win the sprint, proceeded to finish in 8th. My top 5 I only got 2 points out of because I got Norris and Piastri the wrong way around. I got 3 points I tell a lie because I got Verstappen in 3rd and that was 1 off. I put Leclerc in 4th and he obviously got disqualified, so no points there. And Russell I put 5th, so I got no points there. My DNF prediction was Ollie Behrman, again, did not materialize, and my wild prediction was 20 drivers. First lap collision, which unfortunately did not occur because I wouldn't count the Leclerc Hamilton thing as a collision. I was kind of imagining it as a little bit more like something that would cause a retirement. So I'm going to give myself
very light tap between those two drivers. I think.
Yeah, it'd be unfair.
Surprisingly, Leclerc actually got on quite well after that. So
to be fair,
yeah,
I'm going to give you credit for that because if that was me making that prediction, I would be arguing my case that he didn't have an end plate, therefore it's a collision. But
we should acknowledge this is worth 5 points though. So I think that if it's
I still would have fought my case.
Should be because it's just on the edge. Maybe it's not worthy. So
Katch. I'm not that shameless.
Okay, wow, okay.
Right, just to finish off, we've got Lucy, who isn't here, but she gave us our predictions last week. She said a top 5 of Norris, then Piastri, then Leclerc, Verstappen, and Russell. So she did pretty well because she, like Callum, predicted Verstappen correctly. So 1 point each for Norris and Piastri because they were both 1 place off. Verstappen getting 3 points, and then Leclerc in 3rd and Russell in 5th getting 0 points respectively. She put a sprint race win for Piastri, which gives her no points because we don't do the 1 position away thing for a sprint. She put Ocon as a DNF, which is another 0 points, and all rookies finishing. If I'm not mistaken, this happened, correct?
I believe so, yeah, because
Which...
it was only Alonso that didn't finish.
He's a rookie, to be fair, so we can't be giving her 5 points for that.
No. Lucy will be so angry if we're listening to.
She would be fuming
to this podcast. So no, we're gonna fair play to her. She did get that one right, so that is 5 points for her, I believe, as well.
Yes, it is. So she comes out on top for this weekend, getting a total of 10 points somehow. It's a very good score to get this early on. That's a great score. But that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you guys very much for watching. Please make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode where we will keep doing a roundup of all the news that has happened over the last couple of weeks. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you then. Goodbye.